On September 3, 1260, in the Jezreel Valley, a Mongol commander refused to chase a fleeing enemy, and because of that single decision, Cairo burned by spring. The commander was Kitbuqa, a Naiman Christian serving the Mongol Empire, and the fleeing enemy was Baibars, the Mamluk general whose feigned retreat was designed to draw the Mongols into a killing ground at the springs of Ain Jalut. In our history, the trap worked, and the Mongols suffered the first decisive defeat of their westward expansion. In this alternate timeline exploration, we examine what could have happened and why the real history unfolded differently. Because on this day, in this valley, Kitbuqa hesitates. He has spent 40 years watching Mongol armies use the feigned retreat as their signature weapon, and something in the pattern of Baibars' withdrawal, too orderly, too rehearsed, strikes him as familiar. He holds his tumens on the high ground, and when Sultan Qutuz springs his ambush against an enemy that never arrives, the Mamluk army stands exposed in the open field, facing the finest cavalry on earth with nowhere left to hide. But what no one on that field could know, what would not become clear for a generation, was that the fate of an entire civilization's heartland was being decided in a single afternoon. To understand what was lost that day, you have to understand what had already been destroyed. 2 years earlier, in February 1258, Hulagu Khan's armies had taken Baghdad, the seat of the Abbasid Caliphate for 5 centuries. The Caliph al-Mustasim was executed, the House of Wisdom was ransacked, and contemporary accounts describe the Tigris running dark with the ink of drowned books. Aleppo fell in January 1260. Damascus surrendered without a siege that March. The Ayyubid order that Saladin had built was gone. Only one Muslim power of consequence remained west of India, the Mamluk Sultanate of Egypt, a regime of slave soldiers barely a decade old, ruled by Qutuz, a man who had seized the throne only months before. When Hulagu withdrew the bulk of his army eastward after news arrived that his brother, the great Khan Mongol, had died, he left Kitbuqa with a reduced force, perhaps 10 to 20,000 men. It was this smaller army that Qutuz marched out of Egypt to destroy. History remembers his gamble as the salvation of Islam. In this timeline, it becomes the moment the door swung shut. The battle, once joined on Mongol terms, is not close. Qutuz's ambush force, committed too early and to no purpose, is caught reforming when Kitbuqa's wings sweep down from the slopes of Mount Gilboa. The Mongol horse archers do what they have done from Korea to Hungary: they encircle, they exhaust, they annihilate. Baibars, the architect of the failed trap, cuts his way out with a few hundred riders and flees south toward Gaza. Qutuz is not so fortunate. Accounts in this timeline say he died in the final stand of his royal Mamluks, refusing to run from a battle he had sworn would decide the fate of Islam. He was right about that much. By nightfall, the only field army the Muslim world could still muster has ceased to exist. Kitbuqa sends riders east to Hulagu with news of the victory, and then he does what Mongol commanders always did after breaking an enemy in the field. He advances. The road to Egypt lies open, and there is no one left to close it. Gaza falls within weeks. The fortresses of the Sinai coast, stripped of their garrisons for the campaign, surrender or are stormed. Through the winter of 1260 and 1261, panic moves through Egypt faster than the Mongol vanguard. The Mamluk state was never a nation. It was a military caste holding a country, and with its army dead at Ain Jalut, the caste tears itself apart. Baibars attempts to rally a defense at the fortress of Bilbais and is murdered by rival emirs seeking terms. When Kitbuqa reaches the Nile in the spring of 1261, reinforced by fresh tumens, Hulagu has sent west. Cairo's notables face the same choice Baghdad faced 3 years earlier. They know what resistance brought Baghdad. They open the gates anyway, hoping submission will buy mercy, and it partly does. The city is spared the total massacre, but it is stripped, garrisoned, and broken as a capital. The last independent Muslim power west of the Indus is extinguished, and here the story could end, a tale of conquest like 100 others. But the strangest chapter was only beginning, because the men now ruling the Nile were not who the terrified survivors expected. Kitbuqa was a Christian, a Nestorian. from a people converted centuries before on the steppe. So was Hulagu's chief wife, Dokut's Khatun, who in our own history was mourned by Eastern Christians as a protector of the faith, and riding with the Mongol army were the vassal king Hitham I of Armenia and Bohemond VI of Antioch, Crusader prince and Mongol ally. In this timeline, their gamble pays out in full. Armenian and Frankish contingents enter Damascus and Cairo as favored auxiliaries of the world's greatest empire. Churches reopen in cities where the call to prayer is now regulated by Mongol decree. In Rome, popes who once preached crusade against the Tatars begin drafting letters to them as instruments of providence. Yet the reality on the ground is not a Christian restoration. It is Mongol rule, pragmatic, extractive, and coldly tolerant. Mosques are taxed, not raised. Muslim clerks still run the bureaucracy because someone must. The Ilkhanate now stretches from the Euphrates to the Nile, and its masters care less about which god is worshipped than about who pays the tribute and who keeps the roads safe. The deeper wound is slower. The great engine of Islamic scholarship had already lost Baghdad. Now Cairo's Al-Azhar, Damascus's schools, and the endowments that funded scholars from Spain to Persia fall under rulers with no stake in sustaining them. Some libraries survive because Mongol governors find them useful. Others are sold off, scattered, or simply neglected into dust. The holy cities present the sharpest question of all. Mongol suzerainty reaches toward the Hijaz, and though the deep desert defeats permanent occupation as it defeated nearly everyone, the pilgrimage routes now cross taxed and garrisoned land. Mecca and Medina endure, but as dependencies at the edge of an empire ruled from Tabriz. Islam does not die. A faith carried by millions does not die from a lost battle. But its political heart stops beating. For the first time since the Prophet's companions rode out of Arabia, there is no Muslim great power anywhere between Delhi and the Atlantic. The center of the Islamic world shifts east toward India and inward toward the scholars and mystics who learn to preserve a civilization without a state. And then, within a single generation, came the turn that no conqueror ever plans for. Empires built on horseback are inherited by grandsons born in palaces. In our own history, the Ilkhanate's rulers converted to Islam within 2 generations, absorbed by the civilization they had conquered. In this timeline, the pull is weaker, the political prestige of Islam is broken, and the court balances Nestorian Christians, Buddhists, and shamanists. But the arithmetic of ruling is unchanged. The peasants of Egypt and Syria are Muslim. The tax rolls are kept in Arabic. By the 1290s, Ilkhanid princes are quietly marrying into local elites, and the empire fractures along the same seams every Mongol state fractured along: succession wars, plague, the slow revolt of the ruled against the rulers. What never returns is what was lost at Ain Jalut, the confidence of a civilization that had never, in 6 centuries, lacked a sword of its own. When the Mongol grip finally loosens, it is not a restored caliphate that fills the space, but a patchwork of successor emirs, Armenian lords, and coastal Frankish enclaves quarreling over the ruins of 2 empires. In the history we actually inherited, Kitbuqa took the bait. Baibars' feigned retreat drew the Mongols into the ambush. Qutuz's hidden wings closed around them, and Kitbuqa was captured and executed on the field. Ain Jalut became the first irreversible Mongol defeat, the proof that they could be beaten, and the foundation of a Mamluk state that guarded Cairo, Mecca, and Medina for another 2.5 centuries. The libraries of Egypt survived to carry the learning that Baghdad lost. All of it balanced, on one September afternoon, on whether a single commander trusted his suspicion or his aggression. We like to believe that civilizations rise and fall by deep forces, economics, geography, faith. Mostly they do, but sometimes the ledger of centuries is written in a moment, by one man on a hillside deciding whether or not to chase. At Ain Jalut, the real Kitbuqa chased, and a world was saved that never knew how close it came to needing saving.